Hi friends, welcome to Eyes of My Heart with Vicki Jean. I want to share one of my dad's favorite scriptures today and what it means to me. As many of you know, my dad was a pastor for over 40 years. And one of the scriptures that he would often share was the one found in 2 Timothy. And I want to read it real quick here and then reflect on it because it has become one of my favorites too. It says, "For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind." 2 Timothy chapter 1, starting with verse 6. "For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind." That speaks to me in a very personal way, because I've been one who has dealt with fear much of my life. I have been one who has dealt with anxiety much of my life. And here we are being told that God has already put within us this gift of Himself. Again, God isn't a Him, but this gift of love, this gift of our true essence, our true being, who we are created in God. It is here within us already, but it gets so covered up by things that result in fear, anxiety, anger, judgment, self-doubt, self-criticism. And many of those things lead us into actions and behaviors that are harming to ourselves and to others. And basically, in the midst of it all, we have forgotten who we have always been in this love of Christ. And here the Apostle Paul is talking to Timothy, and he's saying, I want to remind you, fan into flame this gift of God that is in you that you received by the laying on of hands. Now that's another whole issue that I might talk about later, this idea of energy. You know, laying on of hands was something that was done, it was a common action back then. Oftentimes, fathers would bless their children or impart a blessing by the laying on of hands. And I want to talk about that later because I do believe in this energy of love that we can pass on to other people. But for now, I want to talk about this gift that the Apostle Paul says, I want to remind you to fan it into flame, which tells me it can become a smoldering ember if we're not careful. If we let the things of this world and the situations in our life to kind of snuff it out, that can happen. And so one of the questions I want to ask you are, who are the people in your life who fan into flame this gift of God that is within you? Or do you have people who try to snuff it out? Just questions to think about. But what I love is that he reminds Paul, he says that, or he reminds Timothy, he says, fan it into flame. And maybe it's not always people. I think there are some even spiritual practices that we can develop that fan that gift of God into flame within us. And for me, I've found that happening through things like meditation. That's a spiritual practice. And even the spiritual practice of what I call mindful movement. Sometimes music, that more meditative kind of music does that for me as well. But there, I need people. And to be honest, I haven't had a lot of people that are what I would call fanners of the flame. I've had people who were squelchers of the flame. And that's probably why I needed the spiritual practices to help keep it fanned into flame. But fanning also shows action. It's not something that we just sit around. If you just let a ember sit there without somehow fanning it and bringing some oxygen to it to enliven it, it will eventually just smolder out. That can happen to the gifts that God has placed within us. So the second part of that verse says, "For you have not been given a spirit of fear. You have been given a spirit of power." That's energy, of love, and of a sound mind. Think about that. Sometimes we can get overwhelmed with fear. Things that are happening in the world, things that are happening in our life, diagnoses that we get health-wise, relationships that seem tumultuous. We become overwhelmed with fear to where we can't even make a sound decision on what the next right step should truly be. Another reason why we need those fanners of the flame. But he says, you have not been given a spirit of fear. So if that is what is ruling your life, you need to get in touch with the real spirit, the true spirit of love of God that is within you. That has to be fanned into flame. So that's what I wanted to share today. It speaks to me because I am reminded, no matter how I'm feeling, no matter what I'm experiencing, I do not have a spirit of fear that has to rule me, but I have a spirit of power, and it's that divine power, energy. I like to call it energy, and that energy goes back to this idea of we are all 99.999% energy. We think that we're this flesh and bone, and we often make our planning, our decisions, our everything based on these tangible things. And there's a place for that. I mean, we are living in a 3D world. We have to function in it. But don't ever forget that you are more than just a physical being. You have a divine spirit within you. A spirit that brings the energy of love, that heals, that brings wholeness and equanimity and an awareness of who you truly are, and can allow you and free you to live out of that truth. Find the fanners of the flame in your life. I don't know who that may be for you. I know I look for them, and I want to be a fanner of the flame for others. So if you don't have a fanner of the flame, let me know. I want to do all I can to fan into flame that gift of God that is within you, because you have not been given a spirit of fear, but you've been given a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind, a wholeness out of which you can live and be who God knows you to be. That's my prayer for you today. And I am so thankful my dad shared that scripture with me. He went through a lot of struggles in his life. Emotionally, he struggled with some things. Obviously, being in the pastorate, you struggle with a lot of sometimes people who don't like what you're doing, and persecution and the pressures of being on call 24/7 for 40 years. And, those kind of things can weigh you down, can try to snuff out that spark, that gift of God. But he had to find the fanners of the flame in his life. And I think for him, a lot of it became his own personal quiet times alone with God that did that. And so whatever it might be for you, I encourage you to find it. Find that fanner of the flame, of that spark of God, that gift of God that is already in you. And then I just wanted to close with this about the laying on of the hands. A few years ago, I think I was probably in my early 50s, I felt led that I wanted my precious mom to lay her hands on me and to pray a blessing over me. That was something that was often done in the Judeo-Christian families and religious communities. And I told her this on the phone because she lived in Indianapolis and I was in Michigan. And she, of course, was just like, of course, honey, absolutely. And I told her why. I said, I just feel like, number one, my mom just exudes love in every pore of her being. And so I knew her energy was one of deep love and a kind of an intimacy with God, an intimacy with the divine love. And I was at a place in my life where I was just tired of always struggling with anxieties and fears and what ifs and the whole thing. So the next time I was down there, she did that. And it was such a precious, precious time. And she just laid her hands upon me and she prayed the most beautiful blessing. Personal, she knows me, but I also believe she was praying what the Spirit of God was prompting her to pray. And I just believed that in this energy that is within us, just like Jesus had energy that people felt, we have energy not only within us but all around us. And I believe she was pouring within me this blessed energy, this fanning of the flame of that gift of God that was in my heart that I wasn't fully aware of. And breathing that breath of life that would cause it to become a blazing flame of light and love and healing in the world. And that will always be such a precious memory and moment I have with my mom. And it went within me, and I believe it with every cell and fiber of my being. May we be that kind of light energy in the world, the love of Christ that is an energy. God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. And He has placed within you a gift for you to live out of. Find the fanners of the flame and be a fanner of the flame of that gift of God in others, so that this world, the people around us, can experience and glimpse that wholeness and that peace and that joy and that soundness of mind, heart, and spirit. God bless you guys. Take care.